Hello and welcome back to the squashbagel. I think the last time I was on a video like this, we were unboxing the Head Radical 135 SP, and the idea was to sort of review it over 4-6 weeks, but life just got busy. So a few updates. There's a baby squashbagel on the way who is due in September, baby boy. So that's been priority number one. So quite busy with that. And then number two, being quite busy with my World Squash Federation Level 2 certification, and happy to announce that that's in the bag. So got that, I think it was last week. So things have just been so busy, and I have actually been playing with rackets, but I haven't actually had time to review it. So without further ado, let's talk about the Head Radical 135 SP. So I think Head has been actually very quiet for a while. Probably over the last 3 years, that's where we've actually seen a lot of movement with respect to some of the key players that they've been signing, and a few changes to their range which have made it probably a lot more attractive, to say the least. I think some key signings in the last 3 years have been Amanda Sobey, Sebastian Bonmalay, and the poster boy for many years has obviously been Omar Mossad. And some new additions obviously that they've added to the team being Olivia Weaver, Leonel Cardenas, Gina Kennedy, Hani El Hamami, and obviously the new poster boy who is Paul Cole. So as we spoke about last time, the version that I have is the 135 SP. So SP stands for slim body. So you do get a 135 variant of this, which has a smaller head size. I think it's about 470, so just a little bit smaller. Or no, it's actually 460, so just a little bit smaller than this one, but I'll just need to make sure on that one. I know in the past it was like that, but anyway. You do get a 135 version of this, which is not a slim body variant. So it's a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier. And you also get a 135X, which I have reviewed before. Also a bit of a chunkier version, a bit of a larger head. This is Head's new take on hybrid rackets with a longer mainstring, although it really does look and feel like a traditional shape racket. But anyway, you get a 135X, and then of course you get the 120 SP, which looks exactly the same as this, but only 120 grams with respect to frame weight. Although it is labeled as 135, the all-in weight, I believe on the two that I have here, it's 158.6 grams and 159 grams. So not exactly the lightest, but also not exactly the heaviest rackets, especially when you're thinking that it is a 135 gram frame weight. Just in comparison to other 135 gram versions, I think you've got the Technifiber 135X stock, which comes in at 165 grams. So that's a lot heavier. Yes, an extra 5 grams on top of, I think, of the 150, 160 that I'm talking about now. Yes, makes it a little bit heavier, maybe negligible. And obviously your carver flexes, your 125s coming in about 156. So eventually, yes, it does add up and it is a little bit more heavy. But as I said, a 135 in a slim body variant, really not exactly your heaviest racket that you can get on the market. So with respect to specs, we've got a head size of 475 square centimeters. And once again, this is a racket that comes with the ability to strengthen two variations, right? So you've got the 14 by 17 stringing pattern, which will be what we have here. So we've got 17 cross strings, and we've got 14 main strings. So that gives it a less dense profile, which provides a lot more power. And if you want to heighten up your control aspect, you can obviously get a more dense stringing pattern where you will have the fan pattern. Basically, this is Head's proprietary technology, where they've got the adaptive fan pattern, and if you want to, you can string it in the configuration, which gives you an 18 by 17 stringing pattern, which is obviously a little bit more dense. So basically with a cross, what we have is 4 more main strings basically in the pattern, which Paul Cole used very early on when he switched to this racket, but now we have seen that he's opted and gone back to the normal conventional stringing pattern. So with respect to balance, we've got an even weight distribution, which I can definitely attest to. I have not tried any thinner strings, so let's say 1.1s, maybe that shaves a little bit of weight off the head and it becomes a little bit more head light, but I actually enjoy it with the even balance, and that will obviously be something we'll talk about with regards to some of the pros and cons in the future, or things that I have tried with this. With respect to cosmetics, I think this is probably one of the best looking rackets out there. We've got a bit of orange which fades into a darker orange, which is like a mix of orange and red, and then you've obviously got these grayish blue accents on the side which also come through like that. It's the same as one of the head radical bags that they brought out before these rackets, so it's also just within their range. So I really like it cosmetically. I was never really a fan of orange per se, but I think this orange with a mix of red actually pops out, and I'm actually quite a big fan of it. So I think aesthetically this is probably one of the best rackets I've owned, and I'm quite happy with it. So with respect to strings and grip that it comes with, you'd have to refer back to my unboxing video. But with respect to strings, it comes with the head reflex strings, which I think is it's 18 gauge string, so about 1.2 millimeters, maybe a bit thinner. That was quite tight, as I did mention in that review or that video. And eventually what you see here, you can see there's obviously been a lot of string movement there. I've gone with the Ashaway Supernic XL, which is a 1.25 millimeter string at a tension of 25 pounds, which for me has been really good, a real good balance of power and control per se. Although it is a very powerful racket, so you could probably tension a little bit tighter. I have a friend which plays with a 120 and he's gone for 27 pounds, and he says he doesn't struggle for power. But a lot more of a different build between the two of us. But as I said, with that frame weight of 135, you're not going to really struggle for power with this racket. And then something that's obviously quite typical to head is that oval shaped grip compared to your other racket manufacturers. That's also something that makes them quite unique, and I like it. It fits my hand quite well, and I don't think it's anything that people should worry about. I don't believe it bothers many people, but you know, maybe you're different and you've got other opinions about it, but if you do, let me know. So with respect to Racket, I guess I don't want to call them reviews anymore and who it's for and who it's not for, because I've just really come to, not really a conclusion, but come to a point to realize that if you're a good player, you can pick up any racket and make the modifications and tweaks that you need in order to play really well. So I can't suggest if the racket's for you or not, but I can tell you what I personally liked and disliked about the racket. So let's actually talk about what it is that I disliked about the racket. So this has got probably less to do with the racket itself. I think if you are a blank canvas and you haven't tested many rackets, it's probably not going to be something that bothers you as much. But for me, coming from the Harrow vibe to this one, I did find it a little bit heavy in the beginning. Harrow vibe being 115 grams in terms of frame weight, overall weight of being 140 grams. So this has been a 15, 16 gram, no, overall, basically almost a 20 gram difference. A big jump for me overall in terms of what I have been using and what it is that I liked. There were obviously a few reasons why I moved from the vibe to the radical, which we'll talk about in the things that I do like about the racket. But for me, in the beginning, it was a little bit hard to comprehend and get used to the fact that the racket was a little bit heavier. So it's not something that will bother you over the long term, especially if you come from a super light racket. But the initial 45 minutes might be like, okay, what am I actually doing with this racket? How am I holding it? What's my swing mechanics supposed to be like? There's so many thoughts that go through your head. Maybe for some people, they just pick it up and they say, hey, you know what, this feels great. And that's good. I think one of the things about testing so many rackets in the way that I do it, because I try to play my league matches and coach with them for extended periods of time compared to the beginning, you do get sort of a certain feel for a racket, and you make a lot of adaptations and you make it work for you, that when you move on to a new racket, you have to start that process again. So it's going to be something completely different and you have to start that process again. So it can make it a little bit annoying. So yeah, as I said, probably not the lightest in the beginning, but overall, when you keep on playing with it, you realize it's not that heavy. I think I've just been spoiled for choice with the Harrow vibe. So yes, if you're coming from a Harrow vibe or something that is super light like that, moving on to this type of racket, maybe expect a little bit of a shock factor in that sense, because it's just not as light. Maybe the 120, but I'm not too sure. I think for me, when we talk about some of the pros and cons, there's some really key factors about the 135 over the 120 that steered me towards that direction. But yeah, so that was one of the things. I didn't feel that it was as light in the beginning, so I was hesitant that it was going to be as maneuverable, but eventually I got over that hurdle. So yeah, with respect to that, as I said, it makes you question a lot of things. And I think if you don't have the time or the ability to make the adaptation that you need towards this heavier type of racket, well, there are some advantages that we'll speak about to why you probably would want to use this type of racket. If you're not going to have the time or ability to do so, and you want something that you can pick up and have fun with, then probably it might not be for you. As I said, it's a different shape, it's very different in terms of feel compared to many rackets that I have played with, right? But this was a purposeful decision. Reason being, with the Harrow vibe, I felt it was super light, which is really fun. It's a really fun racket to play around with, but you can develop the habit where you start obviously flicking the ball, which obviously you can get away with the vibe, and then when you start moving on to something a little bit heavier, you start realizing you can't do that, or there's obviously a bit of an issue in your technique because you start to, I guess, not swing as much because you can actually just move the ball and flick it in the last minute. So it's great for the deception aspects in terms of the vibe in the beginning, but the thing is that you shouldn't rely on that to be your deception. So yeah, it took me a while to wrap my head around it, but you know, after a few things of going through swing mechanics, string changes, experiment with different grip thicknesses, I think, you know, one of the things I tried to do was also the whole over grip that Paul he tries to use, tried to change the swing type to start prepping a little bit higher on both sides, and like some things worked, some things didn't, but you know, eventually every person's unique and you can't just go copy Paul Cole and say, hey, you know what, Paul Cole uses this racket, I also want to use it the same way. It doesn't work that way. So as I said, it's not going to be a racket like the vibe that everyone just picks up and enjoys, but if you spend time with it, it is something that you will love, like I do right now. So before we move on, if you like any of the information in this video or are keen on buying a Head Radical SB135 or the 120, look no further than Squashbagel. All the information with regards to Squashbagel will be found in the description box below. And they are selling these rackets at a really good price compared to the other people within South Africa. So don't question them. Give Rudolph an email or a message and let him get back to you with what he can do for you with respect to getting the Head Radical 135 SB. So let's talk about what it is that I liked about this racket. So once I got my preferences right, so with respect to the stringing, the grip, so in terms of grips, eventually I got down to the point where, yes, you can use a caracal grip. That also worked quite nicely, but I seem to be enjoying the Prince. It's actually more of a tennis grip. It's a Prince Dura Pro Plus grip. And that for me has been the most comfortable on this racket. Not too sure why. It was sort of a very random, decision, and tried it out and really loved it, and that's the grip that I'm going with. But if I cannot find these grips anywhere, I will go use the normal caracal. And you know, some people really have certain grips that they do like. So I do have caracals on hand. I've got awesome grips. I've tried it with so many other things. But once you get your preferences dialed in, I think the best way that I can describe it, because this is probably going to be something that will make sense to a lot of you viewers, is that it is effectively a heavier version of the Technifiber Carboflex NS. So, which I think is one of my favorite teardrop shaped rackets, and that's quite interesting to say because I'm getting all of that from a traditional shape. The NS specifically, the Technifiber Carboflex NS specifically, one, obviously you've got a teardrop shape, so you get the power that you get from the teardrop, but with the heavier head, which actually is a smaller handle, so that's how the distribution is done. With the smaller handle, I really enjoy the control that I got with the NS, right? And this actually feels the same way. So I think one of the things that I'll say in terms of major highlights, so expanding on this whole thing of the fact that it feels like the Technifiber Carboflex NS, is that you get a very smooth and controlled swing, right? I've not been struggling for length at all, which is something that I had to consciously work on with the Harrow Vibe because it was such a nice flicky racket, right? I had to put a lot more emphasis on my swing and make sure there was a lot more exaggerated follow through because of how light it was, because of the weight distribution and or the overall weight of the racket, as well as the head size of 475 square centimeters, which is obviously a lot smaller than your Carboflexes. So it is a control oriented racket with a lot of power. I get a lot more of a, as I said, a smooth and controlled swing. And it is something that you can see as a characteristic of the people which play with it. So Omar Mossad, which has been playing with this racket for many years, one of the things that you've always known about him is those consistent drives on the backhand and forehand, which I would say have been the detriment of him in the future because it doesn't seem like he can hit a crosscourt sometimes. But you know, he's going to pepper that ball onto that backhand side, and the thing is that it's going to be a controlled, smooth swing. It's a super classical swing. Someone like Lionel Cardenas as well, who's got obviously, yes, the way his swing comes through and his mechanics and his footwork have to do a lot with it, but you also get a very controlled swing from him. Also, as the poster boy who is of the poster boy for this racket, Paul Cole, getting a very smooth and controlled swing. So that is one of the shining attributes I would feel that I felt was enhanced with this racket. As I said, with the smaller head size of 475 square centimeters compared to the Harrow Vibe, a lot more dialed in terms of control. So even your drives, your drop shots, your volley drops, I really feel like, you know, you can do one of those accuracy tests where you put a piece of paper on the floor. I think there's one that Thierry Lincourt did as part of Squash Skills, you know, where they were doing that accuracy test. I'll clip it on here. And yeah, I really feel that you really get the control that you want from this type of racket, which, as I said, makes sense with the type of players that are using it. So yeah, overall better drops, and as I mentioned, it's not as maneuverable as the Harrow Vibe, but it is still very maneuverable once you get your head around it with respect to the correct string tension. Even when it was super tight, I never actually had a problem with the drops. It was more the drives per se. When I reduced the tension, I really felt it was a lot better, although it was good because of the overall weight. But yeah, as I said, if you haven't played with something super light like a Harrow Vibe or anything else, you probably won't feel a difference. And as mentioned, I am calling it basically a Technifiber Carboflex in the traditional shape, in the sense that you will not struggle for power. That is one thing that definitely does not lack with this racket. It is a super powerful racket in a traditional form. And I've tried a lot of traditional shape rackets. If you see, obviously, the videos that I've done in the playlists on the channel, you'll see a lot of traditional shape rackets, and this by far for me is probably the most powerful, even though it's got such a small head size. So yeah, I think overall, all I can say, it's been a great addition to my game. It's also something that's been giving me the power that I need, and winter is coming up, so I almost had a theory at one point in time that I'll need a summer racket, which would be a traditional shape racket, and a winter racket, which would be a teardrop shape racket. But this is probably one of the first times that I've actually been able to say, well, I don't think that theory is actually going to hold any water, because I'm getting a significant amount of power with this racket itself. In fact, if anything, I have to figure out how to rein in and control the power, although a lot of that is done with the smaller head size. So I think another person that used to use this before, they obviously got sponsored by Technifibers, more Mustafa Sal, obviously, when he was in the juniors. He's never lacked power. You know, the Supreme Curve was also something where overall weight, I think, would be very similar to this. Obviously, a little bit, no, the head size was a 470 square centimeter head size, so just a bit smaller than this, but, you know, very negligible. And yeah, you know, I think previously I've said that the Technifiber Supreme NG, the old school OG, was my favorite traditional shape racket of all time. And I think I've found something that's actually better than that, which is this. So, as I said, overall, really happy with this. I don't see myself changing, especially coming into winter, as I said, getting amps of power. It's a very versatile racket, you know, you can go through different swing mechanics, you know, different tensions, different strings, although as I said, I've obviously gone for the reflex. I've only had these, went through a whole reel. The next thing that I will do when these snap will probably be the Technifiber 305, probably the 1.2, 1.1. I think that's something I forgot to mention. The Racket already has a bumper, which is super useful because it's obviously saved me in terms of scratching a racket like any of the Technifibers these days. And with respect that, it's just kept this racket looking pristine. Probably the best looking racket I've had over a few months, and I've really put it through its paces in terms of coaching, in terms of playing. So the fact that the racket looks almost brand new, except for your bumper strip, is an amazing thing to say about a racket. It's been super durable. I have hit it on the wall, no issues, no cracks, no scratches except for on the bumper, as I've said. So I don't see myself moving from a bumperless racket in the future. I know it looked cool and it's the craze of today with respect to Technifiber, but yeah, it just damages your racket at the end of the day. And I've seen so many of those currently which are breaking. So I don't see myself moving to a bumperless racket in the future. I think even if I hopefully everything goes well and I don't have to. And I think obviously for you who have really enjoyed a lot of these videos, it's a bit of a bummer. Yes, I'll probably test other rackets if it's really, really interesting and someone lets me use it, sure, and I've got the time to do so. Maybe not with Baby Bagel on the way. Maybe not, but at the same time, that's what I'm saying. I'm super happy about it, and I can see why it has been requested. There was a long period of time where it wasn't available in the country, but as I said, friends at Squashbagel have been able to source the rackets, the 120, the 135. They also have the full speed range there as well. So super happy with that, as you would have seen from the unboxing itself. But yeah, I think that about covers it. And yeah, if you have any of these rackets and you have either varying suggestions or agree with things, please drop comments down below. And yeah, I'm not too sure when it is that I'll see you again, but till next time, take care.